in Arizona. Hope you're all having a super fantastic sparkling day. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast number 2016, Grave Secrets, What Cemetery Records Can Reveal About Your Ancestors. I apologize for being on late. I went down a rabbit hole of looking at epitaphs that were on tombstones. And there are some great ones out there. Like I know Mel Blanc, who was the voice of Porky Pig, or as known as A Thousand Voices. That's what it's got written on his tombstone. There's the man of 1,000 voices. And above it all, it's got written, "That's all, folks," which was the saying he was known for, which is kind of cool. So I was looking around to see what other ones there were. And I want you to put in the comments, if you could put in the comments for me, hang on, how did I word it? What's the most interesting or unusual thing you have seen on a gravestone? A tombstone, a gravestone. Gravestones go flat, tombstones sit up. Have you seen on those that kind of stuck in your mind? Maybe there was one on an ancestor's tombstone that you think, well, that was kind of strange. There's all sorts of fun, and the cool part is there's all sorts of fun things that you can find in gravestones. I personally love walking through cemeteries. I cannot tell you how much joy. I know that's the wrong term when you're in a cemetery, cemetery, that I actually feel joyful when I walk through a cemetery, because I'm grateful for all the people's lives who have now passed, because in there may be an ancestor of mine. So I am grateful for their life, because without them, I wouldn't exist. So I'm always grateful for the people in the cemetery whose graves I stop at, whether they're related to me or not, because without them, somebody didn't exist, that wouldn't exist. So they've put their place in the world. They have left their legacy with their descendants. They've achieved things that we don't even know about. Every grave has a story. And this is what I love about cemeteries so much, is going through. Now, some will just have like the last name, date, year of born, year died, and you got no idea who's in there. That is where cemetery records can come in handy. And going into the office at the cemetery and asking them can reveal things, like especially if you are looking for ancestors, and you can go in there and go, look, my great-grandfather is born somewhere here in the cemetery. Here is his name. Here is his year of birth and death. Where do I find him? And may I please have a copy? May I please see the plot records as well? The plot records will reveal a lot of information, because not every person in the grave may be listed on the headstone. Did you know that? Yeah, we have found ancestors or spouses of ancestors or spouses of siblings of ancestors buried in plots, and they're not even listed on the headstone. That's a very interesting case. And there's interesting stories that then come out, because I remember one, was it my second great-grandmother on my mother's side, because she's the one that told me the story. And when we went to the office, we asked for, we told them whose grave we were looking for. They brought over the plot records so we could have a look. We asked for a copy of the plot records, and she looks at it, and the plot record tells you who purchased the plot, when it was purchased, and who is buried in that plot, has got their ashes in that plot. And they'll tell you whether it was a burial or a burial of a body or burial of ashes. It tells you that. It has every date that the plot was opened and why it was opened. Was it open to put a body in a coffin in there, or was it open to inter ashes? It's all listed on there. And like I said, not everybody in there is listed on the tombstone. And so there was one that it was on my mum's side of the family. It's my second great-grandmother. And one of her daughters is buried in the plot, which is perfectly fine. But her husband is also listed as being buried in the plot. And my mum's standing there, and she's reading down the list as we're standing there in the cemetery office. She goes, "Oh, that's a problem." I go, "What's a problem?" And she goes, "This is your second great aunt." I go, "Yeah." I says, "Here's your second great grandmother. This is her daughter. Yep. This is her husband." I go, "Okay." She goes, "Your second great grandmother loathed the son-in-law. She did not like him at all. She tried everything she could to stop her daughter marrying him. And now it looks like they're buried together forever." So there are going to be some funny stories that are going to come out. There's some stories that are going to go, "What? Well, who's this person in there?" And now you've got another person on your tree to go. And they could be the key to your brick wall. You never know. When you go into the office, always be polite. Yep. And just let them know what you're looking for. And when they ask, and when they turn and say, "Oh, they're on this," ask if they have a map. And if they could mark on there where that is and say, I've got a few people that I'm looking for, are they all in that same area? And you can give them when you go to the cemetery, go with a purpose in mind. Who are you looking for that could be buried in that cemetery? And that will help you when you're there. You can turn around and say, these are the people I'm looking for. Where in the cemetery may I find them? And you can get them to mark them on. If they can mark them on a map, would be really cool. And because that way you've then got directions to get to where they are. And you may find clusters where family members are buried within a certain area together, because several plots may have been purchased at the time. At one time when they were purchasing plots, they may have purchased more than one in an area so that their family could be buried together in this particular area. They may have purchased a mausoleum and the family's listed in the mausoleum. But of course, on the outside, it doesn't tell you. It might just have the name, but it won't tell you who's in there. The plot records will tell you that sort of information. It could be they bought several crypts, and crypts are like these big walls. They've got crypts that are big enough to put a coffin in there, single coffins. My mother-in-law is in one, and her husband's ashes got put into her coffin after she passed, and they are now together in that one crypt. So there's instances like that too. So you can go in and you can see by the plot records who's in there and what's happening and blah, 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 blah. So you can find interesting things in there. And when you come across a name you don't know, now you have somebody else that you can go, well, who is this person? Why are they in my family's grave and my family's plot? Why are they in there? How are they related to the family? It could be like in my second great grandmother's case, it could be a son-in-law that's buried in there. You never know. It could be a very good friend of the family who was considered family that could be buried in there. You don't know. But until you research, you won't know. So in many places, tombstones will list the family members like parents, children, and spouses. Grave clusters can indicate extended family groups that are in the same area. They may not have the same last name, but they could be in that same area. Some cemeteries have family plots with multiple generations. You quite often go into cemeteries and you'll see like this big area that, if you look at it, will probably take about 5 or 6 coffins wide. And that's a big family plot. Cause of death and life circumstances may have been written on the tombstones. Older gravestones will sometimes list the cause of death, like died in a shipwreck, victim of the Spanish flu, all sorts of things like that. Epidemics can be traced through burial dates. Many deaths in the same area may indicate a disease outbreak. Accidents and disasters may be memorialized on tombstones. This is why I like walking through cemeteries. The last time I went and visited Brad's grave, I knew where it was. Well, I actually kind of forgot. But I parked where I normally park, and I know if I walk down here, I get to this point here, and he's right there. And it had been a while since I'd been there because, been living in Arizona, had been driving around the country and everything else. So it had been a while since I'd visited him. So I go down there and I get to this tree, and I know he is not close to this tree. I've walked past his grave. And I'm like, damn it. So I look at the path I come down, and I thought, now if I go over, if I go over 2 plots, because I knew that he was the second plot in from the path, and if I just walk up here, which means I'm going to be walking on people's graves, not a problem. I'm not superstitious about that. Although when we were living in our little town where we walked up down the backyard, up the hill to the top there, over the barbed wire fence, it was a broken barbed wire fence. Through the hedge, there was a gap in the hedge. So one hedge came this way, one hedge came this way, and there was a gap between the two where they didn't meet. And you stepped on Mr. and Mrs. Elliott's graves right there. They were buried there in the 1800s. And every time I went over to the cemetery, of course, I had to step on their graves. And I said, excuse me, Mr. and Mrs. Elliott, I'm just coming to visit some people today. And I would spend hours walking around the cemetery, just looking at tombstones and reading things and all of this. Oh, excuse me. And so I always knew Mr. and Mrs. Elliott were right there by the hedge, and they were the grave that I was standing. And I would, excuse myself every time I stepped on and off their grave. So I went to here's the main path. There's like a row for plots. I go over to the second one because I knew that he was the second one in from the path, and I just started walking up. And I finally came across his headstone. It lays flat in the grass, and I looked to the right, and there was this massive piece of granite that was that covered the entire plot next to Brad's plot. It covered the entire plot, and it basically had this woman's life history. And this is why I missed where his grave was, because I didn't know that that was there. I was looking for a blank piece of grass and then Brad's headstone. Yeah, no, there's a full plot-sized piece of granite on the ground, buried in the ground next to Brad's plot. It has this woman at the list at the top there, and it had a picture of her on there, and then it had her entire life history. Basically, her obituary was written on this piece of granite, and I was just like, I was upset because I had lost Brad's grave, and then I found it, and I was so relieved I started crying. And then once I got myself composed, I looked at this thing next door, and I went, "That's a big piece of granite." And I go, "What the heck have they got written on?" Curiosity, genealogist curiosity comes out. What have they got written on here? And it was the woman's obituary, and I was like, "That is so cool." And you could read about her. It even had her parent. You could get a lot of information off that tombstone. It had her full name there, her date of birth, date of death. It had who her parents were. It had her parents' names, including her mother's maiden name. It had her husband's name. It had all their children listed in birth order with their spouses and their children listed. So it had children with their spouses and the grandchildren listed. And then it had down the bottom there the number of great-grandchildren. And I was just sort of like, this is, my little genealogy heart goes boop, 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 when I see obituaries with details like this. If I can't get to a cemetery, I'll go read obituaries. I know I'm crazy, but and I love obituaries that give details. And so this one was basically her obituary written on this huge slab of granite, along with bits of stories about her life and everything else. So that there is a preserved at the cemetery is her life story, along with the name of her husband, her parents, and her siblings were listed on her surviving sibling. Actually, no, it had her siblings on there, including the ones that are deceased. It had DEC next to them that were deceased at the time that she was deceased as well. So there was a lot of and I was sort of like, oh, I'd love to sit here, write all this information down, and go put it in a family tree and see what other information I could find. I did not do that because I actually had to get going to another appointment. But I was glad that I had found Brad's. Now I know when I go back again to look for the huge plot-sized piece of granite with all the writing on it, and I know that he's just next to that. So I'm glad I found that. But cemeteries are very interesting places to walk around. And the cemetery where Brad's buried, it's got different areas. It's got a Greek Orthodox area. It had a Jewish area. It's got a Roman Catholic area. So there's different religions that have like a whole hillside or a whole area over here, and you have to be part of that community in order to be buried there. And then where else? Oh, they had all of these different mausoleums around there, different crypts. They had the big family plots. One of them it was really cool. It had like a bench. It had 2 upright posts with a piece across the top, and that was the tombstone. And the family's information, and then the family name was written on the edge, and on the top was written who's buried in the plot. I thought that was really cool. It's something different and unique. And you say, oh, just go driving up this road, and you'll see the bench. They're on the bench. It was very, very interesting. And one of them is a huge memorial. It's like this whole wall, this piece of wall that's up there. And and they had the military area as well. They had a law enforcement area, first responders area was another area that they had. But it was just interesting walking around and seeing these different areas. And on the tombstones, there's different symbols. Now, I don't know what all these symbols mean, but I'm figuring it out because I'm going to put them together in a PDF so that I can have a list of what all the different symbols mean. But I know that different associations have their own symbols. Different societies have their own, like the Freemasons, the Masonic Lodge. They all have their own different symbols that go on there. On ours, Brad went to USC, so his USC symbol's on there. On the other side, I've got the Royal New Zealand Air Force rondel on there, which is a blue circle with a white. It's not colored; it's just carved into the granite. It's got but the rondel looks like a blue circle with a white circle. It looks like a target, and then it's got a red dot in the middle. Where the red dot in the middle is, it's not a red dot because that's the RAF. It has a kiwi symbol in there that's red, and that's the New Zealand rondel for the Royal New Zealand Air Force. So that's now sitting there, and it's great, and it's just carved into the granite, no color on it or anything. So when my ashes get put with Brad's ashes, then the rest of my information will get filled in. And across the bottom of it, it has "Today is always super fantastic and sparkling." I know it sounds crazy, but I always told Brad if I went before him, I wanted it on my tombstone. If it wasn't going to be there, then I was going to come back and haunt him. Yes. He went first. He had no say. So that's the story of that being on there. But let's get back on target. You will also find military services and honors. They've got the veterans area, usually in a special. If you've got veterans being buried in there, they may be in the military section of the cemetery, and they will have. They may all have the exact same plaque in the ground there, or if you're at Arlington Cemetery, then they're all exactly the same size tombstones, all exactly the same, and they may have on their the wars that they fought in may be listed on there. There could be there will be their name, their rank. There's on some of them I've seen service numbers written on there as well. It will have what rank they were. It may even have the abbreviations for what their trade was within the thing. I know at the cemetery where my grandparents' ashes are interred, we've got the plaque there is in the military cemetery, and it has both my grandfather and grandmother on it because they both served in the military during World War II, which is pretty cool. And then I went to another cemetery where my great aunt has her ashes interred with her husband who fought in World War II. So seeing these there, it brings a lot of pride to me. And there may be stuff on there like crossed swords, eagles, flags. There could be, the badges that they wear that designate what their trade is within the armed services, or what their role was within the armed services. They have those little symbols that they put on their collars or what on their collars. I'm sorry, I'm just totally forgetting all these names. That symbol may be on the tombstone as well, so you can look at that and know that person was a gunner. Or you look at this one and you know that they were a Navy SEAL, and you look at this one and you know that they were part of this battalion or God, I am totally forgetting military names. Oh, so annoyed with myself. But you can tell by the symbol on there what their job was within the military. It may also have on there too, if they were recipients of certain medals, may be listed on there as well, especially if they've got something like the Purple Heart or the Bronze Star or the Medal of Honor. They may be shown on there in symbols as well. But always, whenever you're in a cemetery, always check for graves nearby where relatives are often buried together, even if they don't share the last name. Some other symbols you may see on there, religious symbols. Crosses are common with Christian burials. There's different style crosses that will indicate the different denominations. The Star of David, of course, Jewish heritage. Crescent moon is found on Muslim graves. And life and death symbols, if you see clasped hands, it represents farewell or a reunion in the afterlife. Lambs often mark the grave of a child. Angels symbolize protection and the soul's journey to heaven. Skulls or hourglasses represent mortality and the passage of time, popular in the Puritan gravestones. If you see tombstones that look like trees or tree stumps, symbolize a life cut short. Laurel wreaths represent victory over death. Wheat sheaves indicate a long life well lived. Some gravestones even have coded messages or secret society symbols, especially for the Freemasons, the Masonics. There's a whole bunch of them out there. So how do you find burial records and plots? You've got websites like findagrave.com, billiongraves.com, and interment.net. These ones, Find a Grave, have millions of user-submitted gravestone photographs and inscriptions. Some of them will go a little further and do a little genealogy in there for you, like saying this person is the wife of this person, and here's all the children they had. Here's her parents. Here's his parents. Some of them do a very good job, but verify the information before you go putting it into your tree. That's all I'm going to tell you. Some of them I have noted were not correct. Some of them have more children than they actually had. And no, they were not grandchildren. Some of them didn't have all the children listed. It just had one or two. Some of them had the wrong spouse in there. So, you've got to be careful when you're looking at this stuff where somebody has submitted the stuff. I love the fact that some people are going a little deeper and putting a little more information there. I think it's awesome. And I know some people take really good care of it and verify the information before they put it there. Others, it is obvious that they do not do that. So just be wary about what information you see when it turns around on this person's record, find a grave record, and it's got all these other people and stuff listed. They may or may not be correct. And through your research, you will know if they are correct or if they're not correct. Billiongraves.com is GPS linked gravestone images for accurate locations. So you can actually go on there. It will give you the GPS coordinates and take you right to that gravestone. And it will have the image of the gravestone and take you right to that location if you're in that area. Interment.net is cemetery transcriptions from all over the world. Church and parish records. Many pre-1900 burials were recorded in local churches. Baptismal and death records may list burial locations. And if you've got a graveyard, it is usually like a private. The cemetery is a big public area. Graveyards are more private, and graveyards are what you find surrounding and on the church grounds. You're going to a graveyard when you go there. If you've got a family plot on family land, that's your graveyard. And so you'll find people in there too. If you can find family members in there but may not be able to find one, it could be that one could be buried somewhere else because of where they died at the time. They weren't brought back to the family plot. Or it could be that they did something which meant they could not be buried on consecrated ground. So there is a story there. So you might need to research a little further to find that missing family member out of the family plot in the church graveyard. Cemetery offices and historical societies. Some cemeteries usually have detailed plot maps and records. Historical societies may have old cemetery records or burial permits. There were times when a permit was required to bury somebody, even if it wasn't a cemetery. I'm sort of like, really? But for the cemetery records, when we've gone to get them, like when we were looking for my my great aunt who had passed away at the age of 5, we knew what cemetery we didn't actually know what cemetery she was born in. We were looking for my great grandparents. That's who we were looking for, her parents. And so we went down to the town county offices and told them what we're looking for, and they were very nice and actually sent us back with this great big piece of paper that had the plot maps on it. That had a map of the cemetery on it with the plots written on it. They just gave us a whole bunch of information, and that's how. And when we got there, I'm looking for Granny and Pop's grave. Now I know there's a marker there, but before there wasn't. And so we found and so it turned out that they were buried in the same plot as their daughter who died when she was 5 years old, or 5 or 6. Somewhere around there. I think it's 5. And so we went walking up and down the aisles, and there was a guy working in the cemetery. He was the groundskeeper there. And he says, hang on, I have a map of the cemetery. Let me go home and grab it. And he lived directly across the road from the cemetery. So he popped over there. And while he was over there, we actually found my great aunt's grave. But my great grandparents were not listed on the tombstone. It was just her tombstone. And was sort of like, oh, okay, so they're buried in there, but not much. Now I know that there is a plot marker there. They have a marker there that has Granny and Pop's names on there as well. So that grave has been marked with them in there. But it was interesting doing that. And we had a good chat with the guy who took care of the cemetery, and he was telling us how overgrown it was before he took it over and started doing the groundskeeping. And he'd done quite a nice job down below, but then he looked up the hill, and it's all this wild overgrown, and you can see the tombstones sticking up between all of these just weeds and plants and everything else, and he was busy clearing it all out. But it's a cemetery that is no longer used unless you're being buried in a plot that is, in a family plot that is already there. They're not taking any new burials or anything else. So that was kind of interesting. He was a very interesting guy to talk to. Obituaries and newspaper archives. Oh my gosh, these are my favorite things. Old newspapers often list burial details in the obituaries. And sometimes the obituary will appear after the funeral because they just wanted a private family affair. They didn't want a large funeral. They just wanted a private service and everything else. So only those that they wanted there, they personally invited. When it was put into the newspaper, it put there that the funeral was a private family funeral was held on blah, 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 blah. Or it may turn around and say, this is where we're holding the funeral. And then there'll be a private family burial afterwards at such and such a cemetery. And they could put it after the date so that people can't come to the service. Some cemeteries have pauper graves for those who couldn't afford a tombstone, so check local records for any unmarked burials. Let's see, what have we got else in here? We've also got, I tell you, there are some really cool cemeteries out there. There are cemeteries that I would love to go visit. There are cemeteries that have a lot of famous people buried in them. One of them is Hollywood Forever Cemetery in Los Angeles. The only reason I know about the cemetery is because my in-laws are buried there, along with my father-in-law's family. There's a few family members buried there, and that either buried or in one of those crypts in there. And was it my husband's great uncle who died within a few days of his mother? And I can't remember if the mother went first or the son went first. But they died within a few days of each other, and whichever one was alive, they didn't tell. Oh, it was the son went first, but they didn't tell the mother that the son had passed, and she passed like a couple of days later, like 2 or 3 days later or something like that. And they're buried in the same plot or next to each other. I don't know, but they're in that cemetery anyway. But it was interesting walking around the cemetery because there's so many cool things to see. This cemetery, they actually have events at the cemetery. Like they will do outdoor screenings of classic movies. You go and sit there on the lawn in this area on the lawn in the cemetery, and you watch these classic movies sitting there with your picnic in the middle of a cemetery. I'm like, that is so cool. I'd love to go to one of those. And some cemeteries actually do that. It becomes like a community center. And they do things like that. They have cultural events there and all sorts of things. It's really interesting. But I will tell you, the tours through there, I haven't done the tours, but I've heard really good things about some of the tours that take you through, because there's a lot of famous people that are buried in there. And some of them have very good, have some really cool looking tombstones, like their actual grave marker. Like Burt Reynolds has one. What did his look like? It has like this plinth, and then it has his information on it. But on top of the plinth is like a bust of him with his cowboy hat on. Really cool. There's another one there with a guitarist who has the plinth, and then he's there from like the hips upwards, and he's playing his guitar. There's other ones there. There's ones that's shaped like a rocket. I tell you, there are some really cool tombstones. There is a family that there's a lake in the middle of in the cemetery. There's a lake with a path that walks across to the mausoleum that sits on top of the lake, and that's some family's private plot out there on the island in the middle of the lake. It's really cool. And then they have all sorts of different things. And if you're like looking at different, I'm just looking at some pictures of some of them. When you and like the one that's on the lake on this island on the lake, it could be big enough to be a house. Just saying, it's very large. But there's a lot of interesting people that are buried in there. A lot of them have some very unique things on there. So I found some pictures of some that are buried that are at actually no, I don't know where these ones are. But I did a search on unusual epitaphs on tombstones, and I came up with ones like, let's see, Jesse Woodson James. So he died on, he was born on September the 5th, 1847, murdered April the 3rd, 1882 by a traitor and coward whose name is not worthy to appear here. Another one says, make love, not war. And then underneath in small letters, it has next time. Oh my goodness. There's one that on the tombstone, on the back of the tombstone, it says, I told you I was sick. Let's see. I have no idea what that says because I can't read it. It's very unclear. There's one that's got the guy's name. It's got his birth date, his death date. And then it says, should we lose each other in the shadow of the evening trees, I will wait for you. And should I fall behind, wait for me. I thought it's really cute. Here's one here. It says, "Here lives Clyde. His life was full." And that's in big letters. And little letters underneath it says, "Until he tried to milk a ball." This is the one that I saw. It's got the guy's name. Actually, I think it might be a her. I'm not sure, because both first name and middle name could be either gender. So we have a tombstone here with the person's name on it, their year of birth, their year of sick, and their year of death, their date of birth, their date of death, and then underneath it says, "See, I told you I was sick. P.S. I knew this would happen. I just didn't know it would happen so soon." That was brilliant. There's some people that have some great. Oh yeah, I'm not reading that one. Only because the way they have it lined up, how they have the first letter of each line spells out something I'm not going to say. On this guy's one, it says, "Raised 4 beautiful daughters with only 1 bathroom, and still there was love." Yeah, I could agree with that one. Let's see. This guy, on his tombstone, it says he never voted for Republicans and had little to do with them. I'm trying to see if I can find one that has. That's a cool one. So this guy's got it on his name. He was a junior. Date of birth, date of death. In fact, he died 15 days before his next birthday. That was interesting. I was like looking to see, how old they were when they passed. And this guy was 15 days from celebrating his. Oh, heck. Hang on, man. Do math, Helen. Brain's gone completely dead. 72nd birthday? His 82nd birthday. He was 15 days off from celebrating his 82nd birthday. And underneath it says, "The black sheep of the family, but I've had fun on this earth." There are always flowers for those who want to see them. "Here lies good old Fred. A great big rock fell on his head. R.I.P." This one here, it has his. It has, the usual thing: his name, his date of birth, date of death, loving father of, and the children's names. I love it when they do that. Beloved grandfather of, and the names. And then at the bottom of his tombstone, it says UFO, real spacecraft. Mel Blanc has got "That's all, folks" on his man of 1,000 voices, beloved husband and father. Oh, Merv Griffin, "I will not be right back after this message." And the "not's" got an underline in it. Let's see. Let's do a couple more. Oh, that's a nice one. And it's got musical notes on either side of it. And it is a Jewish one. It's got the Hebrew written underneath in that. But it says, "Her piano played the music of her soul." Isn't that beautiful? I love that. Somebody's got, "It's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice." And it's got "Lifestyle" of Bob Cunningham. That one I can't read. They haven't photographed that one very well. So there's some interesting things that you can. This one is, again, name, date of birth, date of death, and then it says, "Uncle Walter loved to spend. He had no money in the end, but with many a whiskey and many a wife, he really enjoyed his life." That is so cool. "Beneath the stone is a lump of clay, lies stingy Jimmy Wyatt, who died one morning just at 10 and saved a dinner by it." Does it really say what I think it says? He loved bacon. That's what it's got on his tombstone. He loved bacon. Oh, this one, the last family's name was Trouble, 1856 to 1965. And underneath it says he was no trouble. Okay, that there is just a few of some of the things. This is why I like walking through cemetery. Oh yeah, he loved bacon, and his wife and kids too. Yeah, so there's some really cool different epitaphs. Ma loves pa, pa loves woman. Ma caught pa with two in swimming. Here lies pa. So anyway, those are just some of this is why it's so fun to go walking through cemeteries, because you can read what's on tombstones and things. There are some beautiful sayings on some, beautiful quotes on some, beautiful tributes on some. Most of them will have the person's name, maybe their full name, it may just be their first name, middle initial, last name, and it may have the full birth date and death date, or it just may have the year they were born and the year that they died. And then underneath it may have loving husband, loving husband, loving father, loving wife, beloved husband. It may have something like that. And there could be something quirky on there as well. You never know until you go to the cemetery and have a look. So what's some of the most unusual things that you have found when walking through a cemetery that marks a grave? So what unusual grave markers have you seen? What epitaphs have you seen that were actually quite funny? Let us know in the comments below, because I'd love to see them. But with that, I think that's all that was on my list. Let's check my list. Yeah, so cemeteries are more than just resting places. They're history books in stone. If you're researching your family history, visit a cemetery, look for symbols, dig into burial records, go for a stroll through the cemetery, because you may find another person in your family's grave. And graveyards may seem spooky to some, but they hold so many answers about our past. Keep exploring, keep searching, and you just might uncover a hidden piece of your family history. You may even find the key to unlock that brick wall that you may not have found had you not gone and visited a cemetery. So with that, we are out of here. Go out, have a super fantastic, sparkling evening, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. Pacific. Hey, konera.